I will say, sir, Osrith said apprehensively, as summer drew to its highest, as you have asked me to be truthful. I do not think Constantine is ready to fight. At least, not ready to fight and live. She had been instructed to report back to the head of the household guard on a weekly basis, and she had been taken aback when Sainid had asked her, bluntly. He was, Osrith felt, doing well. But Constantine was only 11, it was madness for his uncle to have taken him out on the battlefield the year before, the time she had saved him. It wouldn't have happened at Bibbenberg. But this was Dunnottar, not Bibbenberg. While her former home was impenetrable, with just a wharf open to the sea to catch a ration of fish when under siege, Dunnottar was at the center of a community, of the monastery and the village. The Norse came without warning, and destroyed everything. Constantine did not have luxury of being ready. He had to fight, or he would die anyway. Can he do it? Asked General Sainid. The young man had his long black Gaelish hair plaited in one long braid. He looked at Osrith earnestly. No, Osrith said. But I am sure you will tell the king that he is. Are you ready? Sainid's question surprised her. When you fought last year, was your ferocity an attack out of fear? Or, could you do it again? 88,888,888. How they pulled it off, Osrith cannot tell. Constantine was the weak link, where the plan would unravel, if it ever did. I'll talk to him, Sainid said, his black hair catching the light. I will explain that you are fighting in his stead as a model. He will understand that. He is strong, Osrith emphasized, rubbing her left forearm, where he had legged her up 2 days ago and trod on it, hard. But he cannot anticipate his enemy. He is too young, long I have known it. He is not yet 12. And you are 13 next harvest. Sainid stared at her. 12? Why, I would have given you to be 14, or 15. Sainid lowered his head, looking at the glow on her golden hair as the morning sun warmed it. Osrith turned away, looking over the battlements. Where would the battle be? More importantly, when? He would have his spies, no doubt. Why was she doing this? It was a question Osrith had asked herself many times over the last few months. She could go, she could leave. Why hadn't she? Let us go over the plan again, Osrith said. You will bring Constantine to the armory, he will dress, Sainid said, slowly. I will bring him to the kitchens. He will take off his armor and you shall wear it. I will explain that he has the best vantage point to watch you. A skein of geese soared overhead. Osrith looked up. You will take the armor and dress. You will take his sword. My sword, Osrith pressed. Sainid nodded in acquiescence. You will dress and take your sword, and you will flank Domhnall. And fight, Osrith thought. And, just then, the image of her brother, holding aloft Sobrit's head dissolved into her mind. He would be fighting now, somewhere. He would be vanquishing the Danes, Osrith was certain. Osrith tightened her right hand around Feda's sword, and the King's general nodded. 88,888,888. It was only one short day until uncertain peace shifted to bloody war. Standing beside Domhnall, the king before them, the Norse, led by a huge warrior, long blonde hair from under his helmet charged towards them. Osrith held her sword tightly, stiffness spreading in her limbs. She shook them out, flexing her damaged left hand as it clutched Constantine's and blinked in the wally morning fog. Osrith never remembered battles, just snippets like a dream. As the warriors came past her, she moved as if her limbs were feathers, as she ducked and weaved. She strode out with the nobility, sword high, as horses streamed past her, as if solidifying from the mist itself, Domhnall swiping at body after body as they swiped down at the infantry, before sliding down from their steed to continue organized death on foot. Before her, men charged, howling like the fury of the sea filling the foggy arena. Some words, some were that of his kin, Eochaid, king of Strathclyde. and Osrith stepped forward, into the running line of a Norseman with wild blonde hair, without even a look back to the Culdees monks, who had lined the riverbank. Monks, 50 or 60 of them, charged into the fray, and behind them, the golden heads of the Strathclyde Welsh shone through the smur. His ambition to seize her family's territory of Bernicia was unbounded, Osrith knew, and, were it not for the Norse, he would have sought to fulfill this Pictish-held ambition generation after generation. She could cut and run, Osrith considered, as she fought 2 Norse, before one became engaged with 2 of its household guard. But, if she did that, she would never find Utrid, she would never see Benbobunberg again, free of the tyranny of Elfric. She would never even make it off the field of battle. Hours later, and somehow, the miracle had happened. The Picts had forced the Norse off the field, the Strathclyde Cymric chasing them towards the coast. 2 lines of attack had been enough to confuse in the fog. Some had staggered into boats, seeking help from Northumbria, from the new king in Cumbraland, Guthred, whose reign was sanctioned by the Danes. But King returned and had losses too. Osrith scuttled, as soon as she was able, to the kitchen, whereupon she removed Constantine's clothing before kneeing him in the stomach. The astonished boy looked at her, betrayed. But Sainid, who had now also returned, explained he needed to be shaken and dishevelled on meeting his uncle, and he nodded, accepting as Sainid removed her armor, looking in horror at a wound to her shoulder and leg. "I've had worse," Osrith said, thinking of her pierced hand. Her uncle had sanctioned that. She tried to wave away the general, but the warrior would not have it. "Be in the throne room in half an hour," he instructed Constantine, who, Osrith realized, was shaking, whether with fear or anger, as Sainid led her to the kitchen. Ignoring Glymery's raging at his kitchen being commandeered as a makeshift hospital and, in turn, fussing over Osrith too, Sainid pulled off her leather clothing, and then tearing off her wool undergarments. Osrith stood there in nothing but her boots as he bathed her arm and her leg with water infused with precious salt. She shivered, though it was warm, feeling shame that the man's eyes were upon her nakedness. Sainid seemed to sense this, and was swift, before leading her to the armory, giving her new clothes. "You fought valiantly," Sainid said, pushing her arm carefully into her new jacket. That meant a lot coming from him. When she'd struggled into everything, she sagged, tiredness overcoming her. "Go to the throne room too," Sainid instructed, his blue eyes twinkling as he smiled at her. "Stay in the shadows, listen. Learn. There is a plot against one to install a Pictish king once again." Osrith felt her mind consider that day. The plot, often debated. What if Eochaid had, instead of turning on the Norse, had turned, out of their river boats, on the Picts, or rather the Gaelish royals who held the Pictish throne? It only took one traitor to create a stranglehold, such stranglehold that, Osrith knew, would never work at Bebbanburg. Her old home was built to withstand siege warfare. It was easy to see, with support of the nobles, that the Gaelish king could be overthrown. And she found, as she dragged her tired body across the courtyard, that far from running, she had made a tiny difference at Dunotter, in the land of the Picts, which had inadvertently sheltered her. Was this, in fact, what loyalty felt like? The warriors who had fought that day were ranged in front if the king who, on his raised throne, could see them to offer words of praise of their skill and their victory. Osrith peeped around the ebony doors, noticing first the men, that to hear of the glories of the day, of deeds done and those who had distinguished themselves. By its side Constantine stood, his mouth sulky, but his eyes ranging the warriors, a kind of pleasure shining there as Domhnall handed out treasure. It looked ill, Osrith thought, as he continued to talk, shifting uncomfortably on his well-padded throne, and it seemed like an effort for him to talk. The people she knew at the market, those who guarded their beliefs tight to them, would have a tincture that would relieve him, or cure him. Buck most certainly would, as she had known, when Osrith had found her. The blood that was distressing her. Buck, A tiny woman had taken her hand and to the back of her shop had told her gently that the blood was not death, as she feared, but life. It showed she could be a mother. "I never will be," Osrith declared as Buck showed her the hedgerow leaves she needed. The silver-haired woman laughed. "One day you will. A mother whose children will enthrall the world. Glory must surely go to my nephew, Domhnall, and to the warrior Firelive, my household guard. For the one known as Ivar the Boneless is now lifeless on the battlefield." A roar went up, which lasted for quite a long time. The hated Norseman, scourge of almost every kingdom on the island of Britain, would never again ravish their land. "And to my son," Osrith then heard. The king had apparently moved on with his honors. Osrith peered around to get a glimpse of the boy, who was standing there, still sullen-faced. He was taking all that was being heaped on him, about his charge, the numbers dead, the leading out he had done. That she had done, Osrith told herself. Not that she cared for praise. But, for the first time she realized Constantine might feel betrayed at being denied the chance to stand by his father's side. A hand on her shoulder caused Osrith to jump. It was Domhnall. He smiled down to Osrith. "You fought well, friend," he said, stooping to her level. "For that we are grateful, for that Soras is grateful." He nodded towards another warrior, black-haired, sporting a new slash to his face. He raised his ale in toast to Domhnall. Behind him, Constantine sat by his father, drinking ale too, a grumpy expression on his features. "It is not your fault, Osrith," he consoled, seeing her face fall too. "The truth is, today shows how unready he is for battle." "I?" Osrith pretended. "You believe I was in the battle?" "I know it was you who fought today in Constantine's stead," Domhnall said, warmly. "I tried to keep the worst from you. But, I had Constantine's shield. And your father's sword," Domhnall added, smiling. "You should feel nothing but pride that you have served us well. Constantine needs more time to grow. I am sure he will make a fine warrior, given a little time." Osrith swallowed. She did not feel it right to join in the celebration for this battle, she had not earned it honestly. And her sinews were screaming at her to make her way to bed, for healing sleep. Constantine is impetuous, and spoiled. The simple truth is not all men become what they hope to become, or what others hope they will become. "He will," Osrith said. "He has understanding, he knows people and how to charm them. He thinks a fight and a battle should come easy." Osrith hesitated. "And I don't think I am the right person to show him, to take time with him, someone he respects." "That boy respects no one," snorted Domhnall, swigging his ale. "He respects you," Osrith said. Domhnall smiled at her. "There will be a celebration tonight, a feast. King Eochaid and his warriors will be there. You should come, Osrith." "I will be coming," Osrith laughed. "I am serving your tables,